Okay, buen día, bon dia, good morning, good afternoon, good evening maybe. My name is Hernan Blanco. It's already almost 2 minutes past the hour, and we are very happy to start this second meeting today on this initiative by ARA, the Adaptation Research Alliance, and Fundación Avina, with this new initiative called BASE or BASED, which means building approaches to fund local solutions with climate evidence. As I said, I'm Hernan. I'm based in Chile, in central Chile. It was raining here until half an hour or so it's all looking quite green, which is really, really nice at this time. And we want to start, and to start, I would like to give you some notes regarding how we will be working. First, the event is being recorded, and we have a simultaneous translation, and I guess you're familiar with Zoom by now, but you can see at the bottom of the commands on your screen, you can see probably a button on interpretation, and if you press that button, you can choose the language of your choice. We will be speaking in different languages today, so please go there, choose the language of your choice. If you have any problem with that, please let us know through the chat window, and we will try to help you with that. You can have your camera on if your internet is okay, and we would suggest that we would require really for you to keep your microphone off unless you will be unless you speak, and we will have some space for that during plenary particularly. It's not easy to work with 3 different languages, and we will be doing breakout groups, and for that it would help a lot if you add to your name on your Zoom screen, your little Zoom screen there. If you click the dots that appear up in the right upper corner there, if you click the dots there and you choose change my name or cambiar mi nombre, and if you could add then to your name the language, at least an abbreviation for the language you speak, you feel more comfortable with. As you can see, for instance, in my screen, I've got ENG for English, since I'm speaking English. So that would help us a lot to do the breakout groups, to design the breakout groups, which we start doing right away. As I said, any comment, question that you might have, please write it down on the chat window, and we will react to that. We do want to make this workshop as interactive as possible, and for that purpose, as we did in the first workshop, we are using this platform that I'm sure you might be familiar with. It's Mural, and you will receive the link to this mural through the chat window. And as you can see, I'm here at the Mural platform. It's very simple. It's basically a whiteboard. Right now, I'm here, and I can zoom in to this whiteboard. zoom out. I can, let me just show you what questions we have there. We have 3 columns. On the one hand, your questions, your comments that you will have after hearing to the cases and to the discussions in plenary that we will have today, your suggestions that you might have, and oh, sorry about that, that you might have today after the discussions, and any other comments that you might have. So all that is here in Mural. As I said, it is really simple to use. You just click a post-it here, and you can write down whatever you want to write down. There's one thing that I should warn you about, and it is that when you first access this Mural platform, it might require some kind of verification. So it might be that you have to write down your email, you will receive an email, and it might be that you have to react to that email, respond that email. That's a verification procedure. I'm saying that you might need to do that because in our experience, it's not always that you have to do that. So that's the platform that we will be using. You're extremely encouraged and welcome to use it. We will come back to this platform during plenary. So so that's regarding the platform. And now let me see, I want to go back to Zoom, so I will leave this here. Okay, and to start with, I would like to make a couple of questions to you. I see we have 38 people already here in the Zoom, so welcome all of you again. And as I said, to start with and to make it as interactive as possible, we would like you to go to Slido. Again, probably you are familiar with the Slido, and we will share the link to Slido on the chat window. Sophia, if you help me with that. And what we will do is I will I will go to Slido too, and there's a question there, and you'll see the question. It's quite easy. If you go to Slido, you click the link that Sophia will put on the window chat, the chat window, and you will join this question, this survey, with the number 1845460. So you just write down this number. We will share this number on the chat window. You can copy it, and you open the link to Slido, and you will see the question. Please write down your country. Escriba su país, escriba seu país. Y as you see, we will be seeing here on the screen where you're coming from today, where you're connecting from today to this meeting. And we think it's interesting to see what countries are joining this meeting today. And I can see, and as you can see, we have Alemania, Panama, Peru, South Africa, Bolivia, España, Uruguay, and you can see that the size of the country, of course, relates to the number of people that are present in that country today. So,
sorry for interruption. This is
yep.
Kazi from Bangladesh. I'm in car, huge traffic, so I can't write actually. So I'm from Bangladesh.
Worry.
I'm listening you very well.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Don't worry. It's just a quick question to see, to have a panoramic view of where we're coming from. So that's perfect, and thanks very much for that. And okay, so and now what I would ask you to do, let's see if it works, and this is the risk, you know, of trying to make this workshop as interactive as possible. Let's see now if you are still on Slido, and I changed the question to a different question now. ¿Participaste en el taller anterior? Did you attend the first workshop? Você participou da primeira workshop? And please answer this question now. It's very quick, just a yes or no. We want to have an idea of how many people were present in the first workshop. And I see so far 17 people, 18 people responding, around 70% people that were present last workshop. Thanks very much indeed for participating in these questions. I understand it might be sort of new and a bit stressful. At least it is a bit stressful for us to have all this working, you know, and functioning in real time. We do want to have that sense of being in the same room all together. So thanks for that. So far I have 22 people. Just a last call, if you want to go to Slido, if you want to click in this code 1845460 and just answer the question whether you were present in the first workshop, yes, no. We see so far like 70% people that attended the first workshop. Okay. So with that, I will come back to Zoom, and we will. There's one last thing that we would like to do. You know, this is a consultative process that we are carrying on. This is the second workshop, and a consultative process to understand, to overcome the challenges to local climate action, and particularly the funding of local climate action. And we are particularly concerned with everything related to climate evidence and climate rationale. And we understand these are perhaps not easy to grasp, you know, concepts, climate evidence, climate rationale. And in that sense, a quick reaction from yourself would be useful before we continue. And it is, can you give us a thumb up if you think you understand what climate rationale is? Can you give us a thumb up if you then understand what climate rationale is? With the, I'm asking you to use the reactions within Zoom. If you go to the Zoom commands down in the lower part of your screen, you have reactions there, and I'm saying that if you could use the thumb up if you feel that you understand what climate rationale is. So we have few thumbs up, and I guess it's a mixture of people not being able to participate in time, and perhaps also people that really don't completely understand what climate rationale is. So with that in mind, we will continue, and I want to give the floor to Vicky. Vicky is part of Fundación Avina and is coordinator of the BASE initiative. As I said, there are two main institutions here. There's ARA on the one hand, and there's Fundación Avina with the BASE initiative, and Vicky is the coordinator of BASE, and Vicky will give us a brief recap of last workshop, the first workshop. Vicky, the floor is yours.
Muchas gracias, Hernán. Buenos días, buenas tardes y buenas noches a todas las personas que se suman hoy por primera vez, y también para todas aquellas que ya nos acompañan en esta segunda instancia. Es un gusto volver a encontrarlos y a encontrarlas en este proceso consultivo que está siendo tan rico para todo lo que nos interesa seguir conversando, investigando desde base. En primer lugar, me gustaría extenderles las disculpas de Jessy de María Kini, que es nuestro colega de ARA, que lamentablemente hoy no pudo unirse a la reunión, pero me pidió que les extienda las disculpas y sus saludos. Así que, dicho esto, voy a compartir pantalla para hacer una recapitulación muy corta, por sobre todo para aquellas personas que no pudieron conectarse en el primer taller, y darles ese contexto que necesitamos para avanzar en esta conversación en este segundo encuentro. Así que voy a compartir pantalla. Y voy a agrandar aquí. Perfecto. Bueno, entonces quiero retomar un poco lo que conversamos en la sesión anterior, donde entre otras cosas intercambiamos sobre dos grandes temas, que son los desafíos que entendemos que enfrentan los proyectos, por sobre todo de resiliencia, que estamos trabajando en este proceso consultivo, a la hora de acceder a financiamiento climático. Y una de las preguntas que les hicimos a los participantes y las participantes fue: ¿qué tipo de información han usado para demostrar la evidencia climática de un proyecto? Ya sea un proyecto que hayan desarrollado, que les haya tocado acompañar, que hayan participado de su financiamiento o que conozcan. Y acá van a ver que, al igual que, como contaba Hernán en la experiencia del slide recién, los tamaños también de estos, digamos, estas figuras que están viendo tienen que ver con la cantidad de respuestas que dieron vinculadas a estos temas. Entonces lo que hicimos fue recopilar las sugerencias y la información que ustedes habían compartido en el mural para dar respuesta a esta pregunta y condensarlas en lo que entendemos que mejor explica este tipo de información que utilizaron. Entonces van a ver que, por sobre todo, un tema que salió con mucha fuerza fue que, como información para demostrar la evidencia climática de un proyecto, es preciso usar conocimiento y memorias de comunidades locales. Y en ese sentido, compartirles que algunas de las cuestiones concretas que surgieron tienen que ver con información local no sistematizada, no digitalizada, y también el uso de storytelling, o digamos la posibilidad de captar esas historias que puedan traer las comunidades. Otro tema que también salió con mucha fuerza tiene que ver con la recopilación de datos históricos y estadísticas de variables climáticas. Ahí eso incluye, entre otras cosas, datos de temperatura, de precipitación, de información hidrometeorológica, entre otras. Otro de los grandes temas incluye la generación de información sobre impactos y vulnerabilidades en sectores específicos, ¿no? Cómo toda esa información climática después se traduce concretamente en impactos y en vulnerabilidades, y cómo esto cómo esto va cambiando a lo largo del tiempo, ¿no? Entonces, como por ejemplo hay cambios en tendencias de producción agropecuaria o medios de vida, como para darles algún ejemplo. Y finalmente, otro de los temas que surgió, como también fuente de información para demostrar evidencia, tiene que ver con el intercambio de experiencias con otros proyectos. Ahora bien, como sabemos, obtener esta información no necesariamente es un proceso sencillo. Y ahí entonces les preguntamos qué desafíos habían encontrado para disponer y demostrar la evidencia climática. Y ahí el primer, digamos, y tema más importante tiene que ver con la disponibilización de esa información. Y eso incluye desde la obtención de datos a nivel local, la posibilidad de conseguir datos históricos, la trazabilidad de esos datos y la continuidad de esos datos, la transparencia de esos datos, e incluso salieron cosas interesantes, tales como las, digamos, fallas institucionales que hay que permitan la obtención, gestión y después el uso compartido de esos datos. Y otra cuestión que me parece relevante también compartir tiene que ver con la falta de acceso libre a los datos. Después, otra cuestión importante tiene que ver con la dificultad técnica y los altos costos para realizar estudios climáticos y también para monitorear y evaluar los impactos. Y finalmente, como último tema para compartir, existe, o más bien se han identificado dentro de las opiniones de los participantes, una brecha de entendimiento entre lo que se entiende localmente como, digamos, evidencia climática e incluso cambio climático a nivel local y a nivel nacional e internacional. Entonces ahí surgieron sugerencias o propuestas tales como que el enfoque de arriba hacia abajo no refleja la realidad, o dificultades de las capacidades a nivel de las comunidades para entender el cambio climático como se entiende en otros niveles. Y otro tema interesante que surgió también tiene que ver con el involucramiento de organizaciones intermedias para generación de información regional que puedan usar diferentes actores y así evitar que cada beneficiario o cada comunidad que desarrolla un proyecto produzca su propia evidencia. Y finalmente, el otro tema que recién Hernán nos provocaba con su pregunta tiene que ver con cómo se asegura la racionalidad climática de un proyecto. Y acá las principales conclusiones que obtuvimos en función de las sugerencias y los comentarios que nos compartieron tienen que ver con el acceso a datos y la calidad de esos datos, y luego el desarrollo de modelos climáticos. Esto implica uso de información y gran cantidad de recursos asociados a la producción y a la obtención de esos datos, buscar información cercana de redes climáticas, y la generación de proyecciones con datos accesibles. Otro tema para asegurar la racionalidad climática tiene que ver con la participación y el involucramiento de diferentes actores y sectores de la comunidad, con procesos participativos y asegurando la cercanía a las comunidades. Un tercer tema fue asegurar una relación entre el problema que hay que solucionar y cómo las actividades del proyecto efectivamente proponen resolverlo. Y finalmente, una propuesta de alineación del proyecto con planes nacionales. Eso a modo de síntesis, y para finalizar, quiero compartirles, para ahondar en esta provocación que nos hacía Hernán, en algunas definiciones que encontramos sobre racionalidad climática que me gustaría que ustedes también conozcan. Entonces, por ejemplo, la Organización Meteorológica Mundial propone como definición de racionalidad climática aquella que garantiza que los vínculos entre los impactos climáticos, la acción climática y los beneficios para la sociedad se fundamentan en los mejores datos climáticos y ciencia disponibles. Por otro lado, el World Resources Institute propone que es fundamental para entender y desarrollar la racionalidad climática, examinar los riesgos climáticos, los impactos y las vulnerabilidades existentes a corto y largo plazo, e identificar las actividades que aborden esos riesgos, impactos y vulnerabilidades. Y finalmente, el Fondo Verde para el Clima establece una serie de pasos para desarrollar esa racionalidad climática que incluyen un primer paso que tiene que ver con armar una base de la ciencia del clima, y para esto es necesario apoyo científico que ayude a justificar, digamos, en función de los datos de evidencia y la teoría del cambio para todos los proyectos y actividades que sean financiados por este fondo. Un segundo paso que tiene que ver, en nuestro caso, como abordamos temas de resiliencia, me enfoqué en temas de adaptación, con obtener información sobre adaptación, y esto incluye tanto impactos climáticos a ser abordados como vulnerabilidades y riesgos de esos impactos climáticos. El tercer paso tiene que ver con soluciones, y eso incluye priorizar las intervenciones que puedan implementarse para poder abordar las barreras y los desafíos que se hayan encontrado basado en un análisis de opciones. Y finalmente, el cuarto paso, que es el de integración, incluye a poder integrar de una forma un poco más amplia a este proyecto en la política nacional e internacional y en los procesos de toma de decisiones. Así que, por mi parte, compartirles eso, y ahora pasar nuevamente a que Hernán nos siga guiando y que podamos profundizar y cuestionar también, si así lo consideramos, estas definiciones de racionalidad climática de la mano de las tres personas que nos van a acompañar hoy en el próximo panel. Adelante, Hernán, por favor.
Thanks very much, Vicky. we thought it was important to recap what happened in the first workshop. In the remaining time, we have a bit more than an hour. We want to do basically three things. On the one hand, to have a panel with three cases, very interesting three cases that we will be discussing with. Then have breakout groups so that you can meet with 3-4 other people, get to know them and get to exchange views, experiences on what we are discussing here. And the third thing we would like to do is a plenary where we can, where you can bring some of the things that you discussed in the breakout groups and any other comments and questions. Of course, again, I repeat, if you have comments, questions, you can use the window chat, the here in Zoom. You can also use the mural, and please do use the mural platform, this whiteboard that I showed to you. And we will now then move to the panel. Thanks very much to our three panel members today. We will have, on the one hand, Joanne Carling. Joanne, and I've got a paragraph for each of them. Let me summarize them because it's a long biography. But Joanne Carling was the Secretary General of the Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact, a coalition of 50 indigenous organizations in Asia. In September 2018, she received the Champions of the Earth Lifetime Achievement Award from the UN Environment Program. She is presently the Executive Director of the Indigenous Peoples' Rights International, IPRI, and part of the guiding committee of, at Pawanka Fund. So thanks very much, Joanne, for being here. Let me introduce the two other panel members. The second one is Dora Luz Miranda Rios. She is the Latam Business Development Manager for Open Forest Protocol. Her focus is to connect forest operators, organizations, governments, and individuals to the Open Forest Protocol, and which is an open source platform for communal measuring, reporting, and verification, MRV, of forest data at scale. Thanks very much, Dora, for joining us today. And then we have Gao Muganga, and she is currently working with the Environment, Natural Resources, and Blue Economy Global Practice and the Agriculture and Food Global Practice of the World Bank. She has contributed to the analysis of agriculture value chains and aggregation of small producers to increase their access to market linkages and growth in agribusiness. She is the team leader for the Zambia Strengthening Climate Resilience program. Thanks very much to the three of you. And as you know, and as we have discussed previously, the idea is first to have a couple of minutes for each of you, couple of minutes to just share with us your case or your experience. So it's like a trailer, you know, of each of these cases, experiences. So please, Joanne, can I give you the floor, and can you open up your microphone and share with us, hopefully in 2 minutes, your case, your experience. Joanne, please.
Hi. Good day to everyone. I'm coming from the Pawanka Fund, which has supported many local initiatives in relation to climate change adaptation and mitigation. But just to respond to the two questions raised, I can re-echo what has been presented as a summary, but to zoom to a particular case, which is in the region where I come from, where we experience series of disasters, and the evidence the evidence that we use is that the changes in the environment, where it's clear that in areas that are deforested, the landslides are even worse, or that's really where it happened. And also the knowledge of communities in terms of the kind of trees that are more resilient to flooding. And with this source of information and what the communities see as the solution, which is strengthening agroforestry, is strengthening the traditional practice before of rotational agriculture, where it strengthens the resilience of the communities, and the best feature of that is the cooperation of communities. We're dealing with indigenous peoples, and the best weapon they have in building their resilience is the inherent cooperation of communities, especially in times of disasters, because we always work together in this kind of situation collectively. So I think that's a very important feature, and also that the solutions are locally driven and has a strong ownership, and that the benefits are to everyone. It's not only few families, but it's actually benefiting the communities, especially those that are suffering the most or the least. So these are some of the the experience that we have in Pawanka in the particular projects that we have supported.
Thank you so much, Joanne, and we will come back to what you're sharing with us. And let's go to the other two cases, and again we will come back and deepen on what you were mentioning to us. Thanks for that. Next here is Dora Luz Miranda Rios, and as I said, Dora comes from the Open Forest Protocol. Dora, if you would open your microphone and perhaps share with us your case, your experience briefly, and then we can continue going deeper.
Thank you, Hernan, for the introduction. I'm actually based in Panama. I am the Latin American Open Forest Protocol Business Development Manager. Open Forest Protocol is a technological platform that allows for accurate measuring, reporting, and verification. So it's an MRV tool. We are actually accessible globally, and that is the beauty of the technology behind it. And what the premise that OFP or Open Forest Protocol is born from is that a generally accepted solution towards preventing climate impact or the impact of climate change is to regenerate and conserve forests in a large scale, drawing down the CO2. And this is something, one of the things that I think globally we've come to an agreement, it's accepted in a consensus. To date, forestation, we know, remains one of the prime-based, nature-based solutions to combat climate change. And one of the challenges that we see in the reforestation and that we see globally in these efforts is a lack of access to being able to do accurate measuring, reporting, and verification, a lack of accuracy and precision of that data, and a lack of funding and local inclusion in those projects. OFP, by being open source, which in easy terms means that it's free to use, permits to do a data management and reporting in a way that really kind of includes and allows for any project of any size to track their data accurately and transparently. And this really is the first starting point to have data that allows for financial inclusion, that allows for furthering funding for projects, and that eventually can also be tracked for CO2 and enter voluntary carbon markets, which is something not accessible to most smaller projects.
Excellent, Dora. Thanks very much for sharing that with us. We will again come back and hear more details from your experience, but now we will move to the third panel member, Gao Muganga from the Zambia Strengthening Climate Resilience project with the World Bank. Gao, if you can open your microphone and share with us a bit of your case experience. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Hanan, and thanks to the two panelists already. It's interesting to hear the stories. So, as introduced by Hanan, I'm an environmental economist with the World Bank, really working on adaptation and mitigation projects here in Zambia. And the case in question is a pilot program for climate resilience, financed by the Climate Investment Fund through the World Bank. The project's main objective was really been to strengthen the country's resilience, both at institutional and local level in terms of responding to climate change, but also adaptation. You notice that the project was originally in an area that's already been impacted by a lot of floods. So the Barose sub-basin, or the Barose floodplains in the western part of Zambia, this is an area where the Lozi people of Zambia in that particular area already experience or live with floods. So they know how to live with the huge floods that come with it. But to be able to respond to the huge poverty levels that was in that particular area, this project brings a number of tools, living with the local knowledge that is already in that particular area, in which this group of people, or most people living in that area, usually migrate during floods to upper lands, so that they're not in the flooded areas. So using the local knowledge with that, but also supporting communities with diversified livelihoods, so that there's no much dependence on rain-fed agriculture, which is mostly a major source of income or major source of food and income for most of the Zambian families. So the pilot program for climate resilience provided a platform that allowed communities to have a diversified livelihood, and also be able to do any farming or anything outside the rainy season. What's key when it comes to data is to realize the fact that there was also a lot of inadequacy in infrastructure for data collection. And so the project provided support to strengthen the National Emergency Response Center to be able to collect data, not only for responding, but also ensuring that the communities are more prepared. So the project handles both side adaptation as well as mitigation.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Gao. Thanks very much for that. I wanted to say a couple of words on what we want to do in this conversation with you three today. As you know, of course, we don't have much time, and we would like to really open the appetite of the participants here to understand what the issues are, and perhaps also to have the issues resonate or not on their experience, on the experience that people bring here. So that's basically what we are doing. There are two main issues or two main dimensions that I would like to highlight with you, that I would like to focus on with you. And I guess what I suggest we do is, I've got two broad questions. Perhaps I can start with one question, which you already somehow addressed, but we can go deeper now. I can ask then both questions, and we can make a round of the three of you reacting to these two questions. On the one hand, one question, one dimension that it is important for us, and that you have referred to, has to do with information. And I would like to hear from you more elements, more experience, perhaps, regarding how to use information, how to access to information, how to assure trust from the different players, from the different stakeholders, that information that you are using, that you are getting is trustable, is legitimate, is credible. whatever you want to share with us in terms of the challenges that you have faced in terms of managing information would be extremely useful, I think, for all of us today. So on the one hand, there is this dimension of information, and let's start with this dimension of information. And perhaps if I can start with you, Joanne, again, and hear more details on your experience using information, generating information, communicating information, that would be very, very useful. Joanne.
Yeah, from my end, because I'm coming from the indigenous people side, which by ourselves, we already have the indigenous knowledge, and that is part of the information as good as scientific knowledge. So when we're dealing with climate change, the information is coming from the communities using their traditional knowledge. Like I mentioned, their observation on the changes of their environment, and also the environment, but also the weather and how the weather is being affecting their livelihoods. And these are the information that we use to show that indigenous peoples are at the front line of the impact of climate change. And of course, some people are challenging this, that it's not scientific. But we already know that the UNFCCC has now recognized this as equivalent to scientific knowledge, and thereby we now have the local communities and indigenous peoples platform, traditional knowledge platform that is critical for climate change adaptation and mitigation. So I just want to highlight that who judges what is credible. From whose point of view are we talking about? And I want to put that on the table. Who is making that judgment on what is a credible information?
Excellent. Yep.
And for me, that is a wrong. As I mean, we need to unlearn how we also view information, knowledge, and where it's coming from. So, yeah.
I totally agree. I think we need as much deconstruction as we need to build new ways of doing, perhaps even. Thanks very much for that, Joanne. Dora, your views, your experience. Thanks very much.
I think that building from that, who's the judgment, who makes that call and on what is real evidence, what is trusted evidence, is where OFP has tried to come in and build a technology-based, blockchain-based platform that is not something that's going to be editable, and that allows for the future transfer of non-manipulated data through time, and that it's something that gets validated by both technology and remote sensing, as well as local communities, and that cross-reference of validation on a data platform that cannot be edited in the future, and it's extractable, is how we justify the validation of data and decentralization of who is the player that says this is real data and this is not real data, which has been a global problem, which has left smaller players, smaller funded projects and local communities away. It has kept them out of what we would call the reforestation and conservation efforts, because of the lack of funding that they could get if they had access to validated data, right? I think that from the Latin American point of view, with some of the projects that we have historically known conservation and reforestation efforts to be something that is done by outsiders. We have known it to be something that has been done by international organizations, private institutions, or even private philanthropic individuals. And this has been a constant, and we've never really seen it as an option for local communities, and further away for local communities to find any type of financial sustainability from conservation and reforestation. And the access to a trusted tool that is technology-based, that is accessible from a cell phone, which is one of those things that everybody seems to have now, regardless of where they are located. This permits a step one. You know, we haven't finished building everything that can be built from transparent data, but I believe that it is step one, giving ownership of data to local communities and their projects so that they can have a transparent way to communicate what conservation and reforestation does for their communities, their countries, and their environment, and eventually measure the positive impact that that can have, and eventually find a way to make it sustainable and financially accessible.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that, Dora. I think it's extremely relevant, all what you're saying. Let me go to Gao. Gao, would you like to share with us your views, perspectives on this?
Thanks, Hanan, and I totally agree with Dora in bringing in the technology aspect. So I think in the case of the PPCR project in Zambia, as I said in my preamble, this project was building from already what's happening in the local area. So the community was already aware of the floods, and they already were living with how to migrate to upper lands in the case of floods. But what was important in terms of securing this data and ensuring there's strengthened institutional arrangements around the data collection, there was a strong support to the Zambia Meteorological Department that produces the weather information, the weather data, climate data, so that there's more credibility in this institution by supporting the infrastructure, supporting the local institutions that are collecting this information, but remaining cognizant of the people that are around these particular areas who already know what happens. But what was also important is to ensure that this data is then used to equip the local communities to be more adaptable. So the project really worked so much with communities. It was a community-driven development project. And so these communities then using that data to know that in the next maybe farming season, instead of planting the maize, which is a norm or mostly planted crop, they would plant more resilient crops. So increasing the diversification based on the data that is available to say there's less rain likely to come to the Western province, or because of continuous droughts, instead of just going for rain-fed crops, how about we do some crops that are more resilient? So really focusing on equipping the national data source, that's the meteorological department, to provide timely, more accurate information that's used by the local communities to be able to live with the impacts of climate change, but in a more adaptable way.
Wonderful. Excellent, Gao. Thanks very much. I find it very interesting what you're saying, not to miss the focus of what we're doing, and to learn and to make the communities more adaptable. I think it's extremely interesting. The second dimension and the second question for this final round with the three of you has to do with this challenge of demonstrating climate evidence or the climate rationale. We see that in our experience, the climate rationale and the climate evidence might act as a straitjacket. Instead of facilitating things, it really make things more difficult when it comes to having climate action at the local level. So I guess the question to the three of you revolves on this, on how to go about this, how to go about demonstrating this climate evidence or rationale. What are the challenges that you have faced? How have you dealt with this? In the case of Dora, I guess it's quite straightforward. It's an MRV tool that you have there, but I'm sure, and Dora, perhaps you can share with us what your step 2 would be, or what your future challenges are. And I guess for the three of you, this question has to do with challenges as well ahead. So Joanne, again, please, floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, from my end, indigenous peoples has always been dealing with the changes in their environment, right? Because it's also a matter of survival. So there are local solutions, local actions that are addressing this, and that's the kind of activities that Pawanka Fund has been supporting, and many of these activities are relying very much on their traditional knowledge and is strengthening their own indigenous governance systems to deal with climate change impacts, both mitigation and adaptation. And what has come out clearly from our experience is that we need a strong local ownership, a locally driven solution to climate change, and also combining traditional knowledge with innovation in order to address some things that are not that communities already find difficult to explain because of the drastic changes that is also already challenging the knowledge that they have. But just to cite an example of when decades already ago, the Inuits in Greenland and Alaska were already saying that the glaciers are melting and it's going to cause increase in temperature. They've been saying that all along, but nobody was listening to them. And they were already proposing measures on how to prevent that. So now we find ourselves in that situation where we're now suffering from the impacts of climate change, right? And yet the kind of support that is provided is not sufficient for us to be able to deal with it because the infrastructures are not also in our communities. So in that regard, it's really important that solutions to climate change should also be locally driven, that is appropriate in the context of those affected. And I do believe that the use of technology is also important in driving this. But just to warn that, for example, some of the technology like renewable energy projects, for example, the windmill farms are actually causing displacements to indigenous people. So it's not, the technology is not the problem or nor the solution. It's not neutral in that sense that it can actually cause more inequality if not used in the proper way, even as solutions to climate change. And we've seen that increasing in indigenous territories. So a lot of communities are requesting for community-based renewable energy that they can manage, and not the type of renewable energy imposed on them and becoming a business. So I'm just citing that, that just to make sure that, again, going back to the local perspective, local context, and local actions are what's needed to drive a stronger community resilience, where they are the ones also providing the solution. So
thanks.
I hope I answered the question.
No, perfect. Thanks very much, Joanne, for sharing that with us. It's excellent. Dora, your turn.
Thank you. I think that our current step is very much focused, as you mentioned, in MRV and in the data transparency, but that's just one axis of what OFP is aiming to do. We're trying to create value, create additionality, and create access to the standardization of data and of tracking reforestation and conservation projects, with the outcome, or if the outcome that we're looking for is to standardize the quality of this data to allow for accessible tools that will get these projects in the future carbon market, voluntary carbon markets. And we believe that the reason behind this is also, it's so inaccessible right now, and it's so confusing. Like if we want to bring the language down, if you talk to people who are actively, or local communities who are actively trying to create conservation efforts in their local communities, even if you look at indigenous communities who have, by all means, being natural conservationists, of their lands, but they have no way of sustaining this, and it's always sort of a government handout. And it's not something that it's me saying that I don't accept it the way that it is, but it's always been that way, and it's historically been that way. What if indigenous communities had real traceable data of what the impact of conserving their lands really does for the country, for the economy, for the environment. And on top of that, what if they had a way to confirm that this data converts into potential financial sustainability through voluntary carbon markets and could become a sustainable conservation project? You know, if we think about it like that, and the level of local community, you know, power tool that data can be and how it can serve them and serve to protect environments, we see that it's really kind of the sky is the limit in terms of inclusion in local communities when you have evidence-based decision-making and they are getting access to a tool that will let them transparently gather that evidence, that will let them do it in a way that is not costly, that would let them do it in a way that they will understand and they will be able to own and manage, because that's another thing. Data is usually owned by the financier. So if you bring an outside party and they do a study on that data is taken and then handled externally. We want to give data access and ownership to the communities, to the projects, and to the local actors that are taking this project forward, so that they can use this data to find sustainability.
Excellent.
And that is the core important level here in inclusion and how to use data for that.
Very, very powerful what you're saying, Dora. Thanks very much for that. And Gao, your turn.
Thanks. Let me just start with agreeing with Joanne's call for locally driven solutions to climate change, which I think Dora also really focuses on when trying to talk about empowering communities with the information. So building from this pilot project that we did in terms of the pilot program for climate resilience, I think recognizing and working with the local communities and the people within the sub-basin provided that that strength in understanding the impacts of climate change and people owning up to what that would be, on how much that has impacted on their food security at household level. And so to invest in a source of data, ensuring that that data is timely, is accurate, is very important, so that if the meteorological department provides information to the local farmer to say it is going to rain or it's going to rain by these millimeters, a farmer has that information in local language, by the way, not only in English, so that they're able to understand what that actually means. If it's going to be these millimeters, when do I need to plant? So a farmer is more informed in the decisions that they have to make. And they actually know that because of these millimeters of rain, I may not have this particular crop because it requires more water. So instead, I'm going to actually have a much more resilient crop. And so with ownership of the data, or understanding a more timely, accurate data, establishing that accuracy and timeliness is very important to have the local people actually own that particular information. Because as Joanne said, local people do have this information. They know the information. They know that it has stopped raining heavily because maybe when it looks like this, the rains won't come. So they have an interpretation of the season. Right. So appreciating that. So when you introduce technology, or when you introduce another source of information, like from a central place, like through government institutions, like a meteorological department, it has to be timely, it has to be accurate, so that it integrates and it feeds into the interpretation that the local communities actually have, so that when they make decisions, the decisions are actually paid off. If it's about adaptation, it's about resilience, there's much more paying off. But if you may allow me just quickly to talk to what Dora was talking about in terms of emission reduction. So we do actually have another project, not informed by the results of the PPCR, but a pilot project on emission reduction in the eastern part of Zambia. And a first pilot of that actually paid off communities for emission reduction by talking about emission reduction, not as the ultimate goal, but the icing on the cake. So communities learn to appreciate the data that they have to put into conserving the forest, ensuring that out of that forest, I'll eventually get a payoff from the emission reduction. So they were taking on the process in accounting, the baseline, the MRV, everything that included the communities, because they own this particular asset. Perfect. So really, I think one's call for locally driven solutions to climate change is one thing I would go for. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. thanks very much. We should have an applause to the three of you now, and please stay with us. Stay with us. We have learned doing this workshops, these meetings, that we have to be flexible. We had thought of doing breakout groups, but we really don't have much time. And on the other hand, we are not too many people here in the room. We are 32 now. So I was thinking that for the rest half hour that we have remaining, we could just work in plenary. We have Joanne, we have Dora, we have Gao, and we can interact. And so what I'm trying to say is that if you want to make a question, if you want to make a comment, please raise your hand, and we can proceed. We can go one by one. I also shall remind you that we have a mural. We have this whiteboard, and it is indeed very useful for us if you write down your ideas, your comments, your suggestions. Remember that in the mural we have basically two sections right now, two columns. On the one hand, some experiences, some lessons learned that you might have, and on the other column we have some specific recommendations, suggestions that you might be doing to this new initiative base that we are discussing today. And as I said, what we are doing is this consultative process in these 3 meetings in order to best design the grant making scheme of this base initiative that we are working in. So if you want to make a comment, a question, please raise your hand, or even open up your microphone and just take the floor. Irene, please go ahead.
Gracias, muchísimas gracias, Hernán. Un comentario nada más apoyando lo que venían diciendo. El papel de los gobiernos subnacionales, ya sean municipales, provinciales, estaduales, en la generación de información y también en la toma de información a nivel local, de generación local, debería ser muy importante, porque muchas veces se presentan proyectos de la misma región, de la misma localidad, que cada uno genera su información, y en realidad el gobierno subnacional tendría que tener capacidad. Se han destinado muchos recursos para generación de capacidades, para fortalecimiento de capacidades, y más allá de continuar con ese apoyo, se debería poder generar ese tipo de información para que los proyectos locales lo usen, pero al mismo tiempo que esta información subnacional se retroalimente de lo que ya se ha generado en el pasado y de lo que puedan llegar a generar los proyectos con los saberes ancestrales y los conocimientos ya cultivados a lo largo de todos estos años. Eso puede ser un buen trabajo de coordinación a nivel nacional, pero requiere algunos estados que tienen muchas fortalezas, que tienen muchas capacidades, muchas iniciativas o incluso localidades. Así que sería un lindo punto de partida empezar a confluir información a en ese nivel digamos, de la población. Gracias, cambio.
Buenísimo, buenísimo, Irene. Thanks very much, Irene. I think it's a very relevant point. And let's see, I've got more hands raised. And my suggestion would be, if we go hearing what you have to comment or the questions you might have, and if we have reactions from either the panel members or somebody else, we can open up the floor for that. So Gustavo, please go ahead. Gustavo, you can open up your microphone and go ahead.
Muchas gracias, el saludo para todos. Yo vivo en Uruguay, soy periodista agropecuario. A su vez he trabajado también en un organismo o sea, tengo formación agronómica y he trabajado en un organismo de extensión agrícola. Y bueno, por suerte, en el acceso a la información, Uruguay tiene una gran cantidad de medios. Es decir, yo hago radio, la radio tiene una penetración muy importante en el ámbito rural. La conectividad, si bien está bastante desarrollada, todavía hay algunas zonas donde es deficiente, pero bueno, se está tratando de cubrir para que todo el mundo reciba información, a su vez participe. Algunos nuevos instrumentos, como por ejemplo, esta institución donde yo trabajé durante muchos años, que es el Instituto Plan Agropecuario, ha desarrollado grupos de WhatsApp la accesibilidad que tiene la gente a tener un celular, bueno, y aparte con un forzante importante que fue la pandemia, se desarrolló y bueno, y hay grupos por todo el país. En cuanto a lo que significa transferencia de información, por suerte Uruguay tiene una institucionalidad agropecuaria bastante amplia y muy, después de muchos esfuerzos, que a veces no son fáciles, tiene una articulación en este momento que también el cambio climático fue quizás también un forzante para que tanto las agencias públicas como el INEA, que algunos se llama INEA, INTA, en fin, es un organismo de investigación, haya articulado con donde yo estaba, que es el Instituto Plan Agropecuario, si estamos hablando de un organismo de investigación y otro de extensión. La academia también se ha articulado también, organismos que son básicamente el sector privado, como el Secretariado Uruguayo de la Lana, que atiende no solamente la lana, sino por supuesto toda la cría lanar, también se ha integrado. Otros institutos de investigación como el Clemente Estable, en fin, se ha
Disculpa,
logrado...
Gustavo, si te interrumpo, pero si puedes redondear para que podamos escuchar más preguntas, por favor.
Sí, sí. Y ¿eso en qué resultó? Bueno, en que se ha generado un aprendizaje a nivel de productores, porque por supuesto, para darte un ejemplo, ya estamos en la tercera o cuarta primavera, donde la estación de primavera tiene una alta producción primaria, en lo que por ejemplo son pasturas, pero ya llevamos casi 4 primaveras con déficit de agua. Eso ha tenido que generar no solamente adaptación, mitigación, sino trabajar mucho en la anticipación.
Sí.
Porque hoy hay modelos que tienen cierta capacidad de predicción de lo que va a suceder. Entonces, bueno, eso genera un aprendizaje y a su vez la modificación de muchas prácticas, tanto en productores agrícolas como en productores ganaderos. O sea que en definitiva, lo único que me quedaría, bueno, es el financiamiento. Hay financiamiento por parte pública, a través de líneas de crédito que se canalizan a través tanto del Ministerio de Ganadería, Agricultura y Pesca como un ministerio que se creó, que es el Ministerio de Ambiente, y aparte, bueno, organismos internacionales como el Banco Mundial, el BID, y bueno, ya ha aparecido ahora Euroclima Plus, que también
lo conocemos, sí.
Exacto, bueno, ha financiado también proyectos, uno que se llama Ganadería Familiar Resiliente, en fin, todos apuntando a construcción de resiliencia.
Sí, Gustavo, hasta ahí tu comentario.
Sí, te podría hablar toda la mañana.
No, por favor, no, porque tengo las manos levantadas de más gente, te lo agradezco mucho.
Por supuesto.
Y sigamos entonces con Tania. Tania, adelante, por favor, abre tu micrófono.
Hola, mucho gusto de verlos a muchos de ustedes y gracias por la oportunidad. Es una plática muy interesante y yo agradezco que se haya dado el resumen al principio, al no haber estado en la primera sesión. Y una de las cosas que a mí me llamó más la atención, o que es donde estamos, la necesidad de trabajo, es que cuando se mencionaban los tipos de información, toda la información era como datos históricos, las cosas que estamos viviendo sobre impacto, pero en este resumen no se señalaba, por ejemplo, la parte de futuro. O a mediano plazo, a largo plazo, que sabemos que es el cambio climático, la discusión, y donde, por ejemplo, ya el IPCC nos decía el año pasado de que estamos en un clima que no conocemos como sociedad. Entonces allí, lógicamente, la parte del conocimiento tradicional indígena es de suma importancia, es crucial, pero llega mi pregunta de eso cómo lo acoplamos con este clima que estamos en un clima desconocido para nosotros, ¿no? Y que cada vez va a ser más extremo en términos de los eventos extremos que vivimos en todas las regiones. Entonces, eso es como más mi observación de cómo vinculamos eso y fortalecemos. Y también solo comentarles que luego podemos tener otro intercambio, que existen plataformas como por ejemplo una que se llama climateinformation.org, que fue montada por la Organización Meteorológica Mundial y por el GCF. Y es para justamente apoyar en las climate rational, en las propuestas de proyecto. Lógicamente, esta información no está a la escala que quisiéramos de 3 kilómetros o de menos, pero es una información que ya está disponible y que es bastante digerible también para apoyar las propuestas de proyecto. Y con Paula ahí podemos seguir platicando a más detalle, pero solo comentarles así a manera general. Gracias.
Excelente. Thanks very much, Tania. Excellent. Gonzalo, floor is yours.
Hola, Hernán, qué gusto saludarte.
Hola, igual.
No veíamos.
Sí.
Acá Gonzalo Roque, soy parte del equipo de Fundación Avina. No soy un experto en temas climáticos, así que si lo que pregunto es desatinado, me lo hacen saber y listo. Mi pregunta tiene que ver con la experiencia acumulada en trabajando en la agenda de reciclaje, y es que yo, viendo lo que se presentó del taller anterior, más las intervenciones, siento que no sentí que aparezca una cuestión que tiene que ver con los datos, y es que cuando la institucionalidad climática o los protocolos están de alguna manera capturados por ciertos intereses que hacen muy difícil acceder al reconocimiento del aporte climático de datos que sí que lo tienen y que los datos se pueden fundamentar, pero la metodología que los hace válidos no está disponible, y esto pasó durante muchos años en la agenda de reciclaje, donde los proyectos comunitarios de reciclaje inclusivo no tenían forma de poder demostrar su aporte climático porque las metodologías habían sido de alguna manera capturadas por las grandes empresas de gestión de residuos sanitarios de alcance mundial, y que de alguna manera crearon muros para eso. Entonces, ¿cómo se lidia con eso desde proyectos locales y comunitarios para cuando sucede esto? Es una pregunta que quería hacer.
Wonderful, Gonzalo, and I think it's a very relevant question. So you don't need to apologize for not having climate experience at all. I think it's a very relevant question, and I hope one of the panel members or the three of them can react to that, and perhaps somebody else too. Paula, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hernan, and everyone. I would like to share a question with all of you. Most of you are colleagues in the climate community, and I feel we talk a jargon many times, and that's a big part of the problem and challenge we have been discussing, right? And the other day, talking with a colleague that works in another field, in peace processes in Colombia, she shared with me an indicator that they built in Colombia to evaluate process of peace, and it was if people were reporting to sleep in their pajamas, because if they were sleeping in their pajamas, this meant that they are feeling in a peaceful context and can sleep in their pajamas, not being ready to fly, to run away, right? So I'm wondering, what can we have? What type of indicators can we dream of that everyone, not only those in the climate ecosystem, so to say, could report as adaptation to climate change? I think we need to think in those terms, like what are the really simple things that indicate to us that people, communities, and territories are adapting to climate change. So if you have any ideas or thoughts, please share, is the question. Thank you.
Looking for the pajama indicator for adaptation then. Thanks, Paula, for that. Andres, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Hernan, and good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Andres. I also work at the the team in Avina, the Climate Action Program. I just wanted to add an additional reflection to all the challenges that we've been mentioning around climate rationality. And we've had a long discussion about climate rationality and what that means and what that entails for local communities. But usually climate rationality is more easily linked to slow onset events. Because as you know, climate change is creating two types of events: slow onset events like desertification and drought and difference in availability of water resources or something related to those issues, for instance, and extreme weather events. And the more that we see climate change and the climate situation worsening, the more we see the second type of impact, extreme weather events. And it's very difficult. It's been, if you think about climate rationale reacting to an extreme weather event, it's impossible to create that link. There are no methodologies relating to creating a project to respond to an extreme weather event with climate rationality. And usually the link that is made in that from the financing perspective is aid, just official aid or disaster relief aid, but nothing related to climate change. And I think the more that we begin to see extreme weather events taking over what's happening in terms of climate change, the less climate finance is responsive to those types of events. So I just wanted to make that reflection, that everything that we speak about climate rationality actually relates just only to slow onset events, and it's been impossible. And just like Gonzalo said now, I do also agree that there's a hijacking of methodologies globally. The discussion around extreme weather events has been completely moved and scraped from the climate conversation, because extreme weather events require a different scale of financing. And that, for instance, in Latin America has a lot to do with the Caribbean and the type of extreme weather events that we're seeing in the Caribbean. Then the reflection becomes that there's less and less, there are more and more climate needs by local communities in the Caribbean, for instance, but there is less and less climate finance that is available to respond to those needs. So I just wanted to add that reflection.
Excellent reflection, Andres. Very, very relevant, I think. Thanks very much for that. Victoria.
Gracias, Hernán. Sumo una reflexión adicional, una pregunta también que me gustaría que alguna de nuestras panelistas quizás, o alguna de las personas que está acá acompañándonos y que pueda traer otra mirada de algo que también me pregunto cuando hablamos de este tema, ¿no? Que es cómo encontramos este equilibrio entre la necesidad de la información y de los datos, con todos estos desafíos que encontrábamos, ¿no? Datos locales, datos históricos, generar modelos, y el financiamiento que implica, con la urgencia que tenemos para adaptarnos a los efectos y los impactos del cambio climático.
Wow, I see we have a number of really interesting points, elements here. I don't see more hands raised, but just as a very quick summary for Joanne, for Dora, for Gao, we've heard of local governments and their capacity to generate, manage information using traditional knowledge and all that. We've heard that we not only have to focus on historical information, but also on what the projections might be for the future. So information towards the future. We've heard that validation methodologies are scarce or are captured by bigger interests, like interests from companies, corporations, and managing then the methodologies, or putting barriers there. Then we heard the need for simple indicators, like the pajama example there from Paula. And then we heard about the rationale in the case of disasters, which is something that we are experiencing in the region. and everywhere. And Victoria raised the point of the urgency versus the need for information and funding. I don't know if Joan, you want to start, or yep, go ahead. I think you're muted. No,
yeah.
Let's see.
Okay.
Now,
Let me start. To be, yeah, just a quick response to address in relation to the climate rationale with the climate extreme weather. I mean, that's exactly what I was saying, that it's local communities saying that the climate is extreme. We're having all the natural disasters, and yet, you know, the support is not provided. So that is providing that link, I think, and that's one. The other one is I think we're also looking at data in terms of the changes in the weather, but we're not looking at the very source of why, the root cause of why we are having climate change. It's the carbon emission, and we're avoiding discussion on how do we actually tackle that and what's the role of communities in addressing that bigger challenge. We're just, I mean, that's my honest opinion, that let's also talk about the real, the root of the problem, and whatever data we're talking about, the data shows that this is, you know, a problem of human activity, and there are drivers of this, and we know who are doing deforestation, who are doing, you know, mess in our communities, destroying the livelihoods of our communities. And so I just want to put that on the table, that the obsession on data information should also look into the wider picture of what we're talking about, so we also tackle the solutions on a wider level, or contribute to the solutions at the wider level. And so also recognizing the role and challenges that communities face, and that's also where the financing comes in, where finance should go to communities, and where it's most needed to build the resilience of communities, and not go through so many intermediaries that at the end of the day, you know, somebody receives $1 million and only 10,000 goes to the communities, because it's all channeled in you know, different hands, that the actual people who needs that support is not getting the support that they need. And that, I think, relates to also the debate on the loss and damages, that the people that are experiencing all the impacts of climate change are the ones deserving the financial support, and yet they're not getting it. So let's deal with that in that regard. So no, yeah, so that those are just also my reflections, and yeah, and again, to also look at the wider reality and the causes of climate change, so that we don't get too small. We're not dealing with the real solutions also. Thank you.
Look at the whole picture.
Yes.
Thanks very much, Jan. Thanks for that. Dora, your reactions, comments.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack from all of the comments.
Yeah, I know.
You know, in different elements. I would like to address, I believe it was Irene who mentioned that there are multiple projects happening simultaneously in similar communities at the same time as historical projects that have happened, and how there is not an adequate level of data referencing and data contrasting to really kind of get the lessons learned, the impact, the value of a lot of these projects. And that's another element where OFP is really trying to push for the collective data gathering and collective data verification. There is a dashboard that is publicly accessible in OFP, and it's accessible to all project operators, where they will be able to see all of the registered forest projects and the data that is monitored and their progress, which means that I mean, there's an endless opportunity for you to see in your same community or in your same country or in your same region, projects that are actively being tracked and their value and the type of species that is in these projects. So the collectiveness of data and the historical of it is something that we understand. We hear you, and technology is really there to support that if it's provided in an accessible form. And that is really always a challenge, to get tools that are accessible for local communities. And on the other side, we had at the end the question regarding our urgency to tackle natural disaster impacts that are an impact from climate change, and to get funding for these situations. And I think that just from, if I'll step out of my OFP lens as somebody that worked in the UN for response to emergency and natural disasters for many years, I'll tell you that we go back to the data and evidence factor. And that's what makes project funding so challenging for climate disaster, because usually in climate response, there is such a sense of urgency that data becomes the last priority. There is not a collective effort in the moment of saving lives that prioritizes data as the key element to sustainability of responding in an emergency. And therefore, when we go back 6 months later to say, okay, so how do we tell the donors what we did? You know, it's very difficult to track the data. What did we respond to? What did we solve? And how do we get more funding to tackle the impact of climate disasters? So I would go back to anybody that's working in disasters to figure out what technology solutions are out there that would allow for an easy tracking of data in an emergency response, because although it's not and will never be a priority above saving lives, it is the only way for us to justify project funding and evidence-based funding. And ultimately, every year it's getting tighter and funding is becoming more and more evidence-based. So we go back to how to leverage technology to make it more accessible for data tracking and have evidence-based decisions and funding.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Dora. And last but not least, Gao.
Oh yeah, an interesting discussion, and I think I'm not going to be systematic, but I may just also provide input that may answer or validate some of the points that I think Dora and Juan has already put across. So starting with the last point that Dora has just talked about in terms of how do you validate and track. So using this particular example on the PPCR project. So what this project also decided to support was to have an institutional infrastructure built in the country. That's a National Emergency Operations Center, which would then look at the national hub and command center for all data and information integrated on climate-induced disaster, including non-climate related disasters and climate change information, so that there is a track. So this National Emergency Center actually tracks. So it not only is there to track where the disaster will happen, but when you bring into, when the institution that is responding to the disasters goes in, they know the number of people that are impacted there. They know the amount of money that moves in, either it's the food or anything, and they use that particular infrastructure to actually track that, so that it at least helps to respond to that question. So that was put in to be able to help respond to the historical as well as the emergency that happens when you have to respond to a disaster. And then Andreas talked about the issue on climate finance not being available now because of we've now moved to extreme events, right? So with extreme events and things that are happening right there and then, you don't really look at the rationale or the methodology. In the case of the pilot program for climate resilience project, it was easy for the World Bank with the CIF to prepare this project because there was historical data. It was just that there's drought and floods in this particular area. But the moment you begin to experience rapid or extreme weather changes, it's very difficult for you to then attract the climate finance. As I think it's one talked about the fact that the communities on the ground are the ones who need these resources, but the finances that do not reach them because they're the ones experiencing this impact. Another kudos that we can give to this project that we're focusing on as an example, the PPCR project in Zambia, is that it was a CDD project. At the project of appraisal, when we appraised this project for preparation, we appraised for 30,000 people as beneficiaries. I must say the project is closing this December. We are now at 500,000 people that have been reached by this project at community level, this I must say. So it really was about really reaching the people who are really impacted. They're the ones who know what they're experiencing with the impacts in climate change. So it was more useful that the resources reach them to help them diversify, not only be depending on the rain-fed agriculture or the things that they could do that were being impacted by the drought and the disaster, but they could do other activities. And that's one thing that was actually done. The other part is on local government capacity for data collection. Again, another part that the project as responding to its objective, which was to strengthen the country's climate resilience as well as institution, was to support the local level. So the project worked with local NGOs who are already based in those areas, and they called them crafts. So these are already working in those areas. As you know, they would have much wider coverage than a government institution. As you know, this is a government project. World Bank and CIF are just financiers. So these local NGOs actually have more reach into the communities. They actually have been working with these communities for much longer. So even responsiveness in terms of the activities that the communities were proposing to be doing, they had much more input. And lastly, to be able to ensure that there's more acceptance of the issues on climate change as well as the data, the project put up a huge campaign. It's a national campaign, Think 2044 campaign. So this flags out, it's flagged out in local languages, in English and radio programs, trying to sensitize people about the impacts of climate change, what you need to do now for you to be able to preserve the environment for the next generation. So like there's a very big campaign on, I think 2044 campaign on the project. So I really appreciated and enjoyed listening to the various discussion, but most importantly, thanks to Juan and Dora for the various perspectives, because it helps draw out the other things that are not possible in a more structured project design. The PPCR is a case in one because it was easier. The historical data was there. It was easier for climate finance to be attracted rather than it was not an extreme event situation. But where there are now more extreme event situation, the response is different. We structure the financing in a more different way.
Perfect.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much to the three of you. We really appreciate your time, your experience, your dedication. Thanks indeed. Two or three things before we close. I'm aware that time is over. On the one hand, a photo. If you could open your camera for a short while, so that we can take a photograph of the meeting, that would be fantastic. Please don't be shy and open up your camera, and we will make a couple of photographs. Thanks. While we make the photograph, thanks very, very much for your participation today. I just remind you that this is the second workshop of a series of 3, and we will have a third workshop, Vicky or someone from the team will remind us the date of the third workshop. It will happen at the beginning of October. We have the mural, and I've seen that we've got some additions there, some contributions there. Thanks very much for that. We have the recording of today's session, and you can see there that the third session will happen the 3rd of October, same time, same channel, and I think it has been a very rich, substantive, solid, and discussion with many takeaways. So thanks really very, very much. I don't know if Vicky, Paula, or someone from the team wants to say anything, just to say goodbye. Paula?
Thank you, Hernan. Thank you very much, and thank you sincerely, everyone, for sharing thoughts, experiences. I just want to emphasize this is a conversation that we feel needs to grow. So please reach out to us if you feel you have more contributions to make. We are running interviews. We are going to be producing a final document, and everyone is welcome to also provide their inputs in that. So if you feel you have more to give back to this conversation, we really want to make this collaborative, and just reach out to us. Thanks.
Excellent. Vicky, anything else?
simplemente agradecerles nuevamente por su participación, por compartir con todo el equipo sus experiencias. Ha sido un gusto enorme que vuelvan a conectarse para la conversación de hoy, y los esperamos para la próxima, que va a ser el 3 de octubre. Sofía en breve les va a mandar toda la información que necesitan, y la propuesta es poder compartir los resultados del proceso consultivo, que, como decía Paula, incluye talleres, revisión de literatura y también entrevistas en profundidad que estamos realizando durante el transcurso de las próximas semanas. Así que va a ser un gusto muy grande poder compartir todo el aprendizaje y las conclusiones para que nos puedan dar su feedback. Muchísimas gracias.
Well, with that, I think we're done. Thanks very much, and have a very good day. And we'll see you in October, we hope. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Good one.